All right, ladies and gentlemen, it looks like good old Tectone, Tectone, is back at it again with a bit of Wuthering Waves content. And this time, it's going to be his honest review on whether or not 2.1 was a letdown. I think it's safe to say that there are some parts of the patch that are, disagreeable to a fair number of players. There are a couple of mechanics, especially in the Hikari hologram fight, that, are just frustrating and maybe like not well designed as a whole. I experienced a couple of bugs myself, and obviously the whole issue with Whimpering Wastes. So with that, I'm excited to see what his thoughts are. Like I mentioned before, I agree with a lot of the critiques that I think Tectone had and he talked about in the Gacha cast. And so I'm excited to see him dive into them a bit more in depth. So with that, let's get right on into it, ladies and gentlemen.
Hey, what's up, boys? So, to a lot of y'all, this camera angle might be, like, new, might make you a little bit uncomfortable. You'll get used to it in time. This camera angle needs to change because if you want to, well, the camera going straight down my hallway, allowing people on stream to see whatever my roommates are doing, just made him a little bit uncomfortable.
Here's one thing about his camera angle that somebody pointed out, and now I can't unsee it. Get ready for this one, guys. It's gonna be a bit of a banger. So, Techie, got any explanation for this, buddy boy? Your camera angle's looking a little glue clear, if I may say so myself. Looks well fastened.
And also, you know what? To be completely real, I really like this new camera angle. It feels different. It feels fresh, and I hope that none of you will find an early death due to the fact that I've changed my camera angle. I hope we'll all get used to it, and we leave a great comment like, wow, Techie, the new camera angle is amazing, and hopefully there's not too many, man,
It's
you know
awesome.
that Tectone's bald today? Yes, I know, and I would like to reiterate, I am bald by choice. Okay, just keep in mind, guys, I am a multimillionaire. I could go buy hair anytime I want. I just don't want to because it's a hassle. And also, I like being bald. I think I'm very handsome. But that's not the point.
Sure, buddy.
The point of this video is to give a honest review on Wuthering Waves 2.1. Now, full disclosure, I am now about 8 to 9 hours into this update. I have done the world quest. I have done as much of the fishing event it has let me to do so far. I have done all of Whimpering Waste, which is still, yes, a very shit name. I've beaten Hologram 6. I have pulled Pheobe, I have pulled her weapon, I have done almost everything there is to do in this new zone and in this new update, and I wanted to give you guys an honest bit of feedback because I think this update came with a lot of good, and I also think it came with a lot of bad. And as you guys know, I do really, truly love this game in the form of Wuthering Waves. It is a lot of fun. However, the more gacha games I play, the more critical I am of them. And if there's one thing I would like to never consider myself, it's a Hoyo Shill or a Kurobot, and I pride myself in giving you guys good, honest feedback about every game that I play. I know a lot of people are upset about how negative I am about Genshin Impact, but if the game were to become good, then I would give it, well, good feedback.
And that's the thing, right? Techie has actually been on record as a bit of an unbiased critic of a lot of things. I think one thing in particular when it comes to the whole Genshin Impact narrative that I think a lot of people don't know about is that he actually loved the story in Fontaine. He has been on record multiple times talking about how Fontaine, particularly the whole dynamic with Farina and Neuvillette, was one of the best stories that the game has ever told. And overall, Fontaine was one of the best regions the game has ever had. He actually played, I do believe, all of Fontaine on stream, played through the entire thing, gave like glowing feedback for it. And then obviously, right, he didn't do the same exact thing for Natlan because let's be honest here, ladies and gentlemen, Natlan sucked balls and is still sucking balls and is probably going to suck balls into the future. So he has the backup to what he's saying here. And so I think everybody, right, should be willing to take those critiques he has for WuWa and obviously the glazing that he's going to do for certain things, right? Like echo loadouts. You don't really have to take it with a massive grain of salt that you might have to with other creators. We all know who we're talking about. Jeff.
However, I'm not going to lie to my audience, and when something is bad, I'm going to say that it's bad. So let's talk about all the goods and the bads of Wuthering Waves 2.1, and if you're new here, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We've gotten a lot of new subscribers lately. The channel views are way up. Thank you guys for watching my shorts. I greatly appreciate that. But yeah, let's get into the goods and bads of Wuthering Waves. So at first, I want to start this off pretty tame, and I do want to talk about the biggest W in the entirety of 2.1. And that is, very simply, very straightforwardly, that is the Old Man and Whale, the fishing event. It's actually a permanent mode, and I will be real, call me a glazer if you like.
Remember what I said?
This is one of the best updates in Wuthering Waves there ever has been. Everything about this Dredge event is very, very enjoyable. I'm not sure if you guys know the game Dredge, but it's pretty much a one-for-one of this event. This really is a good vibe. This is a good time. And I know a lot of people play Wuthering Waves for the combat. I am not one of those players. I play for the exploration, the characters, the story, and the quality of life, and it's a very good time.
I think it's safe to say that the fishing game mode is more so, I mean, it's pretty clear, right? It's more so geared towards casual people. People who are just looking for something to kind of like kill time in the game with, do something that's a bit lower stress, lower input intensivity, stuff that isn't really on track or fully aligned with maybe the previous ways that we were playing Wuthering Waves. However, it's also through that, right? It's not like super tedious, it's not boring, and it doesn't feel like you're struggling against like the minigames mechanics, or like the minigames mechanics are like really obfuscated and hard to work with to get through it. It's just a simple one, very chill, very relaxing, fun progression, fun mechanics. I've experienced some of it myself, haven't gotten all the way to the end, but I can tell exactly what he's talking about over here. If you're in WuWa just for the combat, if you're in WuWa just for, like the super intense boss fights or, all of the end game content, this isn't really going to be your cup of tea. That's why some people don't like this game mode, but you can also think about it this way. You're just being asked to do for the limited time rewards, right? Some of this event over the course of 40 days. And that's not a huge ask, especially over the course of 40 days, but I can definitely see how if you're on the other end of the spectrum, when it comes to why you're playing this game, why you could be upset. But let's be honest, guys. He's just saying up front that he's a bit of a casual when it comes to the game. He's saying up front that he is essentially, and he has said in the past, Tectone, that he's a tourist. And there is nothing wrong with that. Tourists are actually some of the people that spend the most on these games. And I'm pretty sure Techie has spent quite a bit in relation to other people.
The story and the quality of life, and it's a very good time. It seems so small, but the more you do it, the more the world opens up. There's a really lovely story about a man who wants to fuck a fish, and I thought it was hilarious. And it keeps on building up from short humor into, oh God, what's happening? Why is Godzilla here? And it's just fun. And I think we can all agree, as long as these modes are fun, then it's good. And I don't think this is a shitty version of Dredge. I think that this fishing game for Wuthering Waves is a wonderful addition to the game that feels like it's its own and makes it feel like I actually am exploring and fishing in this game, and it's a very relaxing time. I can't give this enough praise. For the sake of not sounding repetitive, I want to cut myself off here, but yeah, this was the best part of 2.1 for me.
And I think one part in particular that we really need to talk about when it comes to the design of the fishing event is the fact that it is heavily integrated with the characters. It's heavily integrated with the on-banner characters in particular, right? Pheobe and Brant, but it doesn't feel like they're being forced in just to sell them. I think that's one of like the major sort of concerns that people have with a game like Genshin Impact or a game like Honkai Star Rail. The events more so just seem like the characters are tacked on just to like give them exposure during the patch that they're on banner. But with this one, they're woven in very seamlessly, and it makes a lot of sense how they're there. And it's just, it works. It's something that draws people in, even if they're not like the biggest fan of the minigame. It's simply like the character development that occurs.
I love it very much. I want to get into the new zones. Just in case you haven't seen them, I'm not going to spoil them for you. There's 3 new zones, maybe 4. Some of them are opening up tomorrow. I haven't seen all of them yet. But for all the zones so far, I wanted to, by the way, I'm giving the fishing event a 10 out of 10. Best event, one of the best events in all of Wuthering Waves history. I love it. Very good.
To be fair, Wuthering Waves has not had a lot of good events that are of this caliber. It's been a lot of like UI related stuff where it's just like a couple of like 2D PNGs have like animations that play. It's not really a lot of stuff where it's like you're actively like in the game controlling the character, going out and doing things in the minigame like it is with the fishing event. Most of the other stuff that we've had in the past is either just pure combat with some buffs or, stuck in like a UI building things and then like selling stuff.
For the new zones, I'm going to give this a 6 of 10. And the reason why this is, the new zones are a welcome addition, and I'm sure you guys can agree with me here, that they feel good, they feel nice, they're fine. They don't really necessarily knock my socks off. I was going to give it a 5 of 10, but the cart system in it made me really feel like I was in Harry Potter, going down into the little vault that they have in Harry Potter's little cavern. It was a lot of fun. There's this fucking giant robot that flies with you, fucks with you while you're on it. It was really cool. And I get to see Zany's big old titties the entire time I'm going there. The new zones are great, but they're not really any, oh man, you really gotta check these out. You really don't. If you never saw these, it probably wouldn't matter. They're cool, but it kind of is what it is.
I think that the new zones, they have a very unique aesthetic, and it's definitely a different vibe, but it feels like there's a lot of missed potential in there, in that it's a completely instanced new area. You can see, like, the ceiling of the new zone, kind of like where it like goes into like the overworld in the sky, and I feel like it was a massive missed opportunity to not be able to fly down from the Alvarado vault, fly into the like the abyss of the underground, and then like make it into like the whole Green God zone. I think that's something that they should have potentially looked into. Maybe it was like way too taxing on like GPUs and CPUs to sort of integrate that into the overworld, but it does feel like with a lack of grappling and a lack of flying in that underground zone, it feels a lot more on the rails than it kind of should have been, especially for a game like WuWa where the exploration has felt really free form, especially in 2.0. You do feel a bit limited in Alvarado Green Gods. And I think that's definitely a fair critique to have. I've experienced the same exact thing.
The new hologram. So I did beat this. And this is my pre-written review. I already tweeted this out on Twitter. Feel free to follow me at twitter.com/Tectone. So I did the holograms already for Phantom Pain. I plan on going live tomorrow and beating the other ones, but I did.
Isn't this the weirdest shit ever? I don't think anybody on Earth had like holograms that look like this in 2.1. Fallacy is not done, Sentry Construct is not done, but then Hecate is all the way on difficulty 6 and completed. That to me is just like, there's no shade at all to Tectone. I'm just confused as to like what inspired him to go to difficulty 6 on Hecate, when I do believe it is the hardest fight out of all of these. Like, Hecate is far worse in my opinion than these two, if I'm being frankly honest. Maybe we're just like different types of players, but I'm like, why is he going all the way on the hardest one and then not doing the previous two, which I find easier? It's just an interesting thought. Just an interesting observation. It's kind of weird.
But I did go here, and I did beat Hecate in about 2 to 3 tries, but I want to give these holograms about a 5 of 10. Once again, I did beat them in its entirety. This isn't me coping saying it's bad because I couldn't beat it, but the problem is that, and a lot of people, well, some people really take offense to this, but I really want you to hear me out here real quick and to just understand a little bit about game design. A player learns when an obstacle is put in front of them and they weren't able to overcome it. Let's say you have a bench press, you have a little 135 barbell on your chest and you're pressing it up and you just can't quite get it. And you say, damn, I'll get it next time. You acknowledge that you weren't strong enough and you should have trained harder. The problem is that the difficulty in good games is trying to get a bench press off your chest. And then the difficulty for Hecate was, oh, you have terminal cancer, you dead. Oh, was there anything I could have done differently? No, you're just dead.
One of my biggest problems with the boss fight is how often there are one-hit kill moves that don't even look like one-hit kill moves. There's one thing that Hecate does where, you know, she starts like doing like the little dance. You're like frozen. You literally get like frozen, like time styles for your character. And then she starts, you know, like going a little bit like this, right? And then dashes towards you. And she even blinks before it happens. Like she has like a shining light on her model. And that one is like, okay, if I get hit by this, it's fair if I die. It's super telegraphed. It takes a shit ton of time. There's a literal cutscene animation for when she's like beating your ass and like you're just like in the air getting fucked up for like 5 seconds. Totally makes sense to get one shot by that move. However, she will literally have attacks where she'll just dashes backward and then conjures a saw blade out of her asshole and then throws it at you. And you just die in one hit unless you're on like a 40k HP character. Every DPS in the game will instantly die from that. And it's just like, some of these attacks, they're effectively all one-shots, but then some of them are so much faster than others, have almost none of the telegraphing that the other one-shot moves do. And it's kind of just like, okay, well, now I just need to know that this nondescript motion she does will one-shot me. And you're just like, okay, it feels a little bit unfair. You just have to learn which moves are going to be one-shots and like what the slight differentiations are and just move forward from there. It's more about memorizing the patterns of her fight. It feels very scripted as opposed to like a flow of battle. It's kind of just like, all right, she's going to use these 3 attacks in a row and then move on to like the next chain of attacks that she does in a row. It's a memorization fight, to be honest, not really like the same level as other holograms, which feel a lot more fluid and dynamic.
Oh, well, damn. So the problem is, Hecate didn't put things in front of you to overcome, things in front of you to intuit. The problem is, a lot of attacks came from behind you, off camera, that did a heavy amount of damage to even one-shotting some of my units with a defense food buff. Yes, a lot of damage. And when a player gets killed out of nowhere, it really doesn't feel good. And I don't want this to be a sign of artificial difficulty, which is, oh, well, you got to play it, die to that mechanic to learn that it exists, and then you'll get it next time.
This is especially frustrating in our second phase, where a lot of these like attacks from behind occur, where you just simply will die to them because you literally don't know that the blades are going to return to her. You just don't know that unless you see them for the first time, and you're like, okay, well, that's a cheap death. That is a cheap death because in no circumstance should you expect attacks to come from behind you. It's just something you just have to die to her. I don't know any person, it legitimately, who would be able to first try the boss on their very first time facing her. I just don't think that's something that can occur because she has all of this kind of like built in, what I like to call bullshit, into her moveset. It's probably something that's impossible on the first try.
I think we can all agree, dying when you know it's your fault feels way better than just, and you're dead. Go again.
Hey, buddy boy, should have known those blades were gonna return, buddy. Even though half of them don't. You should have known that this attack in particular was gonna have blades that came back to me, dumbass. You should have known, buddy.
It's just a cheap death every time you get it the first time.
We want to put obstacles in front of the players to overcome, not just, well, at 47.8 seconds, you're going to have to dodge or you get one shot. Is there any indicator of that? Nah, just feel it out. Nah, those things always suck, and really not a fan of that. I would give the new hologram about a 5 out of 10.
I'd give it lower, to be honest. I think it might be one of the worst holograms they've ever had, if I'm frankly being honest. It's just maybe like a 3 or 4 out of 10 for me. I think it's something where a lot of like the day one people will be like, oh my gosh, it was so hard. It was so crazy. Oh my gosh, I had to work so hard to do it. It's scripted. It's a scripted fight. And I think after you get over like the honeymoon period, it's just not going to be very fun.
Now, it did look really cool, and that was fun. It did look awesome, but a little bit too much bullshit mechanics for me. Not a fan of that. And yeah, I'm wondering if I'm alone on this. Feel free to weigh in on what you would rate everything in the comments. Let's talk about Whimpering Waste. Okay.
Oh boy.
And you guys are going to have to hear me out here. Whimpering Waste is, for lack of a better term, an absolute fucking disaster. Yes, it is. It's an absolute fucking disaster. It is the worst game mode in Wuthering Waves. And let me explain to you why. So first of all, let me explain to you what I thought it would be.
Just as a bit of a pre-warning on my end, I don't think Whimpering Wastes is like a fucking disaster. I don't think it's terrible. I think it's missing a couple of small things that make certain accounts feel very bad. I think that it requires a fair number of upgrades to things like the tokens, a fair number of upgrades to things like some things to shore up the weaknesses that are in character kits or on certain rosters to make it more approachable for the general player base. Because my opinion is, and this is solely my opinion on the game mode, people that don't have certain characters either built or pulled on their account are gonna have a dramatically worse experience in Whimpering Wastes. Just like how you could say, oh, if you don't have Jinxie or Carlotta, these bosses or these holograms feel like shit. Hecate being an example of one of them, Carlotta absolutely destroys them. Whimpering Wastes, an AoE-focused multi-wave event or endgame, is going to feel bad if you don't have characters that focus on AoE or multi-wave. And I think the tokens that they have in the game should have been an opportunity to alleviate that a little bit. And I think it's a miss on their end. So that's just my take on Whimpering Wastes. I'm excited to see what Techie is talking about over here.
wave after wave of enemy. As you kill them, more spawn. They come into a little group. You AoE them down. Their attacks are coming. You dodge and rah, 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 rah. You get them down. You burn them down. You get to the next phase. Could have been fun. Kind of like Nazi zombies in World of Warcraft, or, you know, Horde mode in Gears of War 2. Could have been great. But the problem with Whimpering Waste is the way that Wuthering Waves' enemies are programmed. And so the big issue is, and hopefully you guys can hear me okay, is that the way that it should have worked is, okay, so I have this fucking cat. Okay, and here's the cat. Here he is, right here.
Oh my gosh.
Cat. There's a cat, right? Hurrah! And this cat is to symbolize like 100 enemies. Hurrah! 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 And it's dead. And you'd think you'd pass the stage. But unfortunately, you forgot about the creeper halfway across the fucking map. And the reason why he's there is because these enemies aren't trying to fucking fight you. So what they're doing is here, I'm an enemy, and you're who I'm trying to fight.
Bro is like reminding me of like a fucking Elder Scrolls Oblivion or like Elder Scrolls NPC. Like the way he's like looking at the camera and he's just like, like what is he doing?
And the problem is when these fucking enemies don't try to fight you, when they're just standing there, all it feels like is, how do I get these fuckers to stay in a fucking pile so I AoE them down? And you shouldn't need a Venti ult in order to clear Whimpering Waste. Now, once again, I fully cleared this shit. I fully cleared it. But it doesn't feel good playing like, it's almost like taking care of litter of kittens and you're trying to keep them all in this cage. That way you can eat. You're not going to do that.
He kept that in for a reason.
That way you can take care of them. But these enemies, it would be a fun game mode if it was like a bunch of these enemies, they're in this tight little arena, and you got to AoE them down before they kill you. But the mobs barely feel interactive. I think maybe I got hit 3 times in all 12 of the floors, and they weren't really doing anything. And if they were to try to attack you, one, it would feel better because then it would feel more interactive and less like a fighting bullet sponges.
So I think this is kind of like where I think the take needs a little bit more specification. When you have elites, the mobs with a stagger bar, and the mobs with like with a significantly more HP, those are like actually a bit of a danger in some of the stages, right? Depending on the elites. If there are things like bears or the golems, they will like actually try to beat the shit out of you. And if you're playing certain characters, it's actually really easy for them to beat the shit out of you. And my opinion is having more of the enemies coded like elites, having more enemies that are just simply a bit more aggressive, maybe like the one cost, the small mobs have their own stagger bars or something like that. And there's like a mini breaker, you know, just something like that. It would make it a bit more interesting because what Techie's saying to me is it's not necessarily a fault at all that the content is focused around AoE. The problem that he's experiencing, or I guess the biggest issue, right, is the fact that the enemies can sometimes have wonky AI that has, you know, all of them backing up or some of them backing up and then fucking up your AoE in the process. But this is the thing, guys. I don't think like that's like that to me sounds like actually a small fix. That sounds to me like something where it's like, okay, like a check mark goes up on the aggressiveness, right? Or this part of the enemy AI gets disabled or shifted a little bit. That doesn't sound like a massive, massive fundamental design flaw, right? I think that that's a small change. That's a small update. And it's kind of like in line with what I was saying before, right? The game mode just needs a couple of small things, to become pretty good and pretty complete. And I think that having this impression, right, that it's like the worst, it might be the worst, right, out of the currently available ones, but saying that it's in like a terrible state, if all that's required to fix it are like these small things, I don't think it's in like a terrible, awful garbage state. I think that it just needs a little bit of love and care, a little bit more playtesting, a little bit more variability in how they're changing up the baseline game. and then it becomes pretty damn good. But everything he's saying is accurate, right? Without very intense groupers, those encounters can become more frustrating. You don't need them to clear in the first place, but the grouping characters like the Yang Yangs, the John Shins, the Jians, the Rosias, they minimize those annoying things from happening 1000%.
And if they were to try to attack you, one, it would feel better because then it would feel more interactive and less like a fighting bullet sponges. And two, it would keep them all clumped together so you could AoE them down. We're not asking for easier modes like, oh, stay in the middle so we can hit you. No, we just want you to attack us. That way we can AoE you back. And that would have been really great. But the mode is a massive failure. And I want to go even further because not only is the mode fucking terrible, the affixes to try and make it feel different feel even worse. And let me kind of show you what that means here. Here we go. So they give you these little tokens, these little trinkets. And what they do is this one makes you do more damage. 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 All right. So
To be fair, some of them don't actually make you deal more damage. There's a fair number of them that reduce your cooldowns, right? And if you want to use the,
Oh, if you're reducing your cooldowns, that means you're just going to cast your abilities more often and deal more damage.
sure, you could say that. But I do think that a lot of them allow you to deal more damage in unique ways that you can intentionally activate and that you can intentionally interact with. However, like I mentioned before, there is a lot of stuff missing from the tokens. A token, right? That's basically just Rosia's gadget that puts in some grouping. A token, right? That maybe taunts all of the enemies, makes them immediately attack you, and then deals damage in an AoE, like, 2 to 3 seconds after you activate it. I think there needs to be a lot more creativity on the token side. There are already so many abilities in the game. They had like echoes in previous co-op events that draw aggro from enemies. They have the baseline in the game. They have all the mechanics available from prior events. To me, it's more about like having that creativity in the token design and, in turn, giving a lot more replayability for certain rosters. Because my opinion is that the current design of the tokens is incredibly good. It's incredibly good due to the fact that the last stage has an infinite number that you can use. Some of them really dramatically change the way that certain characters play. And the tokens in particular are one of the best replayability features I've probably seen in an endgame. And I think that once they start thinking way more outside of the box, getting a lot more creative with how they're implementing them and revisiting all of those older mechanics, right, that they've already explored in past like Echoid events, there's a lot of potential here. It's just what we had on release it seems a bit undercooked because we've already seen what these devs are capable of when it comes to thinking outside of the box, and it doesn't feel like a lot was being done here. They do feel a little bit uninspired relative to what we've seen. So that's why I'm saying the tokens are both like a blessing and a curse for the game mode.
So let me tell you what the difference is between floor 1 and floor 12. At floor 1, you do a little bit of damage or a lot of damage to enemies with a little bit of HP. At floor 12, you do a big amount of damage to enemies with big HP. Every wave, every floor feels the fucking same. Unlocking things that make you do more damage isn't fun. It's not. Now, what these should have been to make this more fun is to unlock unique abilities. Like, for example, right? Give one of these abilities an extra button on your keyboard or phone to scoop all of the enemies inside and like shatter them in time, right? Give us other abilities that make this game mode more fun. Or, for example, have one that lets you fly and attack them from above while they're trying to hit you. Now they can't, you go boom, 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 and you fight them like fucking Zeus. These, all they do is, as we raise the HP up, we'll give you a buff so we can keep up with the HP. Well, what the fuck does that do? Every wave feels the fucking same. Have these be unique and special abilities that change the gameplay style of your fucking characters. You know what I'm saying? Like, give one that gives you 0 cooldown on your E.
Well, they do have one that gives you close to no cooldown on your liberation. This one right here, the Pilgrim, whatever it says, the Pilgrim thing. So they kind of do have that already. It's just, they should have just done more. They only have like one upgrade, this one over here that directly affects the cooldowns. It's just, why didn't we have more? Why didn't we have one that works for like the Echo skill? You know, why didn't we have one that works on like reducing the resonance skill cooldown, right? Like, why just one that only works for one subset of characters? Like, this one reduces your resonance liberation cooldown every time you cast a resonance skill. And so it's kind of like only usable on like a Dan Jin. It's only usable on like a Zhang Liao. There's just not a lot. And it's a little bit unfortunate. What Techie is saying is in the elusive realm. That's what I mean, guys. The game has already had so much stuff in past game modes where they've gone crazy outside of the box to explore things. And here is just like one example where they're not doing it.
0 cooldown on your E, or give you one that lets you dodge infinitely. And as you dodge, it leaves an explosion behind you. Or give one that makes your ult bigger. You know what I'm saying? Like, do something to make the game feel better. All these do is, as we make these enemies more and more bullet sponges, we'll give you a buff to keep up with it. It's just not good. The problem is that this mode has so much potential. That's why I don't want to give up on it. Kuro Games, I think this is an absolute failure of an implementation of what you were attempting to do. However, I see the groundwork. I see the blueprint. Dong, I know you can do this. When the new survey comes up, guys, we all need to fill it out because these devs actually do listen. Imagine that.
I guess this is the only point of disagreement I have with Techie. I don't think it's necessarily fair to call it a complete failure, when I do think that just a small number of adjustments would make it feel very good. When there are a couple of like small marks that prevent something from reaching its full potential, and you know, you keep like 90% of the game mode the exact same and you change like 10% of it, you know, I don't really view that as a failure. However, you could say that the problems that require the small fixes are so major that they, you know, are not that great in the experience, or they don't make the experience that great. I could see that perspective as well. But, you know, I think failure is a bit, you know, I think we're stretching it a little bit here. But I do see every single one of his points, and they're all valid. They're all correct.
Okay, not giving up hope, but man, I was severely let down by this endgame. But let's continue on here. Another thing that I believe I need to talk about is Pheobe, little Pheobe. I love this character. I love Phoebe. She is probably the most, no, she's not. Top 3 most fun characters to play for me. My favorites are Carlotta, Camellia, and Phoebe. Very, very, very fun. Feels very different. The character aesthetic is amazing. Every cutscene that she's been in for 2.1 has been very charming.
True, fair.
Her trailer was adorable, and her gameplay was
true.
great. She's not broken. I believe she's about 18% weaker than Jinshi. However, that's fine.
I don't think she's 18% weaker. That's 18% actually sounds like a lot. I think the thing with Phoebe is that she doesn't do nearly as much burst damage. She definitely has a much longer rotation, and she requires way more specific team comps. But like 18%, you also have to think about it this way. It might be 18% from the perspective of like raw damage per second. The thing with Phoebe is that, again, she's going to have longer rotations. She's not going to be doing as much burst damage. She's going to be taking more field time. But I do believe her rotations do more damage per rotation, but she has longer rotations. That's kind of like the big difference between the two. And when you think about DPS calculations, you always got to keep that in mind.
That's fine. I don't need a character to be broken to be fun. I just need them to feel balanced, and that's what I like. I'm hoping we can keep
that is
all
true.
of the
She's
main
very
DPSers
balanced
between 30k and 40k, and they've made the way she deals damage different enough to where it feels good for me as a player. Do I think she's a must pull? No, absolutely not, and that's the way it should be. The only must pull I think there is in Wuthering Wastes is actually Shorekeeper.
True.
That's the only one I think every character would greatly benefit from having.
Shorekeeper is a must pull because Baija sucks ass. That's kind of the main reason. Varina is better than her in multiple compositions. It's just Baija is so fucking bad and so clunky with her swap mechanics that Shorekeeper just feels better in every single way. That would be my differentiation between the two.
Phoebe is a great addition to the game. However, she's not absurdly broken enough to where you need to pull her, but she is a great addition. I would give her a 9 out of 10 for game design. Amazing.
I would push back a little bit on the whole 9 out of 10 thing. I do think that, well, I mean, it's more so related to Whimpering Wastes. This character, Phoebe, is so bad in Whimpering Wastes, it is unbelievable. Her lack of ability to deal any meaningful damage to a character without Spectral Frazzle first being applied on them, and the relatively low AoE of Spectral Rover on their Spectral Frazzle application, makes it so that crazy AoE multi-wave content, she just sucks. She is so bad and requires swap-heavy gameplay that will, like, debuff half of the enemies and then just, like, screw with all of her damage. It's just so rough to play that it's unbelievable. And I think her being released with a game mode where she doesn't feel good at all is a bit of a mark against her character. Because a lot of people, right, are gonna be like, all right, I'm gonna take my new shiny Pheobe, right, that I just built, spent all of these tuners and experience on, and I'm gonna take her into the new end game. And she just doesn't work. She just does not work. And it is a big miss, I think, on Kuro's end by not having some tokens or some stage buffs that make her feel better to use. Because right now, multi-wave content is easily her biggest weakness, and she just feels like really, really bad at it.
Amazing. Other keynotes, I want to let everybody know that I do believe all 1.0 through 1.4 zones should have flying enabled in them. You should have to do something to unlock it.
Okay,
And then be
yeah,
allowed
flying.
to fly like you can in Raguna in the 1.0 to 1.4 zones. I think that would be a massive W to do. I have to go back to Mount Firmament, and farming that without my wings is very miserable. So I'm hoping we get those back for the other zones, and you have to do something in each zone to unlock those wings, and I think it'll be all well and good.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are saying, like, get to like 90+% exploration in any of the 1.0 regions and you unlock flying there. Because one of the big concerns people are having is that the early game exploration experience could get bungled up by the fact that you would be able to just fly to previous locations that would be like obstacles for you in the past, and it would like, you know, diminish the exploration experience. And so saving the flying for after you've completed a certain percentage would, you know, ensure that that doesn't happen. But, you know, it's still something that we still have to get news on to see whether or not Kuro's going to cook on it. But that is the most popular suggestion that I've seen. And from what I've had in my mind, I think it makes sense.
Yep, the music was an 8 out of 10. Flowed very well. No real memorable songs, but
The Whimpering Waste music is pretty good, though. But maybe Techie just hates the game mode so much that he didn't listen to it that in depth. But the Whimpering Waste like menu and actual gameplay, it's very solid. In my opinion, the best part about the game mode is the music, actually.
real memorable songs, but it really kept me immersed and everything felt right. The RTX, I really can't tell the difference in the graphics. But yeah, I don't want to give an
I heard it's bugged.
overall rating because I don't think I've done everything in the update, but those are my thoughts right now. And the reason why it was very important for me to get this out is due to the fact that we have the opportunity to give these devs who are asking for our feedback the exact feedback that they so crave. And I want to be as brutally honest as possible with this game and as brutally critical as I can be, because I don't think sucking the dick of any company does anybody any good, especially when we have a company that's listening this much. Overall, and I mean this generally, there might have been a lot of low scores. However, I think the fishing event alone is definitely worth the play, and Wuthering Waves 2.1 and everything else is icing on the cake. I genuinely think this is a very fun update, and I think everybody would enjoy it if they were to go play it. Nothing too crazy. Whimpering Wastes was a letdown, but unfortunately, you can go try it for yourself and let me know how you feel. Yeah. Still going to play 2.1. I'm going to beat everything. I've almost explored every single aspect. I need the last island to open up and then finish the fishing event, and then I'm all done. And yeah, I'll leave in comments down below if there's any changes in my opinion whatsoever. But I do truly hope you all enjoyed this video. Understand this is coming from a place of concern and well-being for the game. And yeah, I want to see this game do good. And I do believe feedback like this is for the overall benefit. So thank you very much for listening. Hope you all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.
All right, so my overall thoughts on Techie's review is that I do think he's pretty much spot on with every single critique that he has for the game. I do think that everything that he mentioned, it's valid, it makes sense. He even gave like the whole like in-depth example of the whole, you know, Whimpering Waste AI thing and how it's frustrating. The only thing I would say is I think the extent of like calling certain things like terrible or like the worst game mode ever, that sort of like language to me, it would make a lot more sense if the changes and the suggestions that he had weren't so small. And I think that's just me coming in with the viewpoint of some tweaks to some of these game modes and some tweaks to like the tokens, tweaks to like those things. Minor updates would make the game mode really pop, would give it a ton of replayability, and in my eyes, right, would make them pretty damn good. And when it's just like those little small things that are, you know, in the way of making something great, you know, terrible is kind of a harsh word to use. But in retrospect, right, this might be something that he's doing just to prompt a lot of change, just some very, you know, spicy language to get more of like a fire under the devs to actually make those updates. And when it comes to Kuro Games, right, he's spot on about the fact that they do listen, they actually do make changes, and they do things that players want. And I think the way that he voiced all of his concerns is very valid, gave alternative solutions, gave harsh critique at the same time, but it's fair. So with that, let me know what you all think. This is a bit of like my take on the update as well, and peace out.